Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep on something that I think we all kind of take for granted, how a new drug actually gets from a scientist's, like a lab somewhere, to a pharmacy where you can pick it up.
Yeah,
Kind of wild to think about.
it is. It's an amazing process. It takes a long time. You're talking sometimes over a decade.
Wow.
And it costs a huge amount of money. We're talking billions of dollars to bring a new medication to market.
Okay, so let's dive in. You said over a decade, like 10 to 15 years.
That's right.
What makes it take so long?
Well, there's a lot that goes into it. First, you have the research and development phase.
Okay.
And that can take years in itself, and that's just the beginning.
Oh, wow.
You have scientists who are, working tirelessly trying to identify promising drug candidates. They're basically looking for a needle in a haystack. They're looking for that one molecule that might have potential to actually work against a specific disease.
So even finding a potential drug takes years.
Absolutely, yeah. And once they've identified it, then it needs to go through all this rigorous testing. It starts with preclinical research in the lab. They use cells and animals in the lab, and this helps determine the basic safety and efficacy of the drug. Is it safe? Does it actually seem to work?
Right, right.
Before they even think about, going to human testing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you wouldn't want to jump straight to testing it on people if you have no idea if it's even safe.
Exactly, yeah. But even after those preclinical stages, there are multiple phases of what are called clinical trials, and that's where you're actually testing the drug in humans.
Right.
And each of these phases involves larger and larger groups of people.
Okay.
They focus on different aspects. You're looking at safety, what's the right dosage, and then, how effective is it really? And this whole process can take years to complete.
I can imagine. And each one of those stages probably comes with its own price tag, right?
Yeah, you guessed it. The price tag for developing a new drug is, it can be astronomical. Sometimes it reaches into the billions of dollars.
Wow.
Yeah. And think about all the people involved. You've got huge teams of scientists. You've got countless experiments. You've got all those clinical trials, all the people involved in that. And then there's the regulatory hurdles on top of that.
Speaking of regulatory hurdles, where does the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, play into all of this?
Oh, they're essential. The FDA has this crucial job of ensuring that any new drug that hits the market is both safe and effective for the public.
Right.
So they set really high standards. Pharmaceutical companies have to provide tons of data, like mountains of data, from all their clinical trials just to prove that the drug works and that it doesn't pose any unacceptable risks.
So it's not just about discovering the drug. It's about proving that it's actually safe and effective for people to take.
Yeah, exactly. And all of this takes even more time and even more money.
Right.
And honestly, this whole process, it's a huge gamble for pharmaceutical companies.
I bet.
Only a tiny fraction of drug candidates, the ones that start out, in the early stages of research, they actually make it all the way to market. It's kind of like, I don't know, you're placing a high stakes bet and you're just hoping that your drug is going to be the winner.
So that's where I get really curious, because we keep saying billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So who's actually putting up the money for all of this?
It's a mix. There are a few different sources.
Okay.
So you've got private investment. There are venture capitalists. They see potential for, a big return down the line. There are private equity firms that are looking for more long-term investments.
Right.
And of course, you've got the big pharmaceutical companies themselves. They're investing their own money into research and development.
Okay, so it's not like one big pot of money.
No, it's not. And on top of that, you also have government funding.
Right.
And that often comes in the form of grants from organizations like the National Institutes of Health or NIH. And these grants, they're so important because they often support those very early stages of research, when a project is just getting started.
Right. So maybe it's not profitable yet for a big company to get involved.
Exactly. And then there's another way that companies raise capital. They go public. They'll sell shares of stock to the public, and this can bring in a ton of cash, but it also puts pressure on them to really deliver results for their investors.
Oh, yeah, I bet. So we've got this high-stakes, high-cost world. Money's coming from all these different places. But let's get back to the science for a second.
Okay.
So we've talked about discovering the drug molecule itself. But what happens after that?
Well, that's where formulation comes in. Formulation, yeah. It's super critical, but a lot of people don't really know about it.
Okay.
And, it's not just about finding the right molecule. It's about how you deliver that molecule to the body.
So it's like designing the vehicle to get the drug where it needs to go.
That's a great way to put it. And this is where things get really complicated. You have to think about how the drug will be absorbed, how quickly it breaks down in the body, whether it actually gets to the target where it's supposed to go, what are the potential side effects.
Right.
It's a balancing act.
It sounds like a lot to juggle.
It is. And this is where this deeper understanding of something called in vivo correlation, we call it IVIVC, comes in. It's a way to bridge the gap between what's happening in the lab and how the drug actually behaves in the real world.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is IVIVC?
It's basically like it helps scientists predict how a drug will act in the body based on how it's behaving in lab tests.
Oh.
And it's really important for optimizing the formulation of the drug, making sure that it's absorbed properly, that it actually gets where it needs to go, and that it produces the effect that it's supposed to produce.
So it's like a crystal ball. You can see how it's going to work before you even test it in people.
In a way, yeah. IVIVC can save pharmaceutical companies a lot of time and money.
I bet.
Because it helps them identify those promising formulations early on, and that reduces the need for, a lot of expensive and time-consuming human trials.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and a well-formulated drug, that can be a major advantage for a company. If you can deliver a drug that works really well and has minimal side effects, that makes a huge difference in the marketplace.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
This whole formulation concept is fascinating. It's amazing how goes into, designing the drug even after you've discovered the actual active ingredient.
It really shows you how complex drug development is.
Yeah.
It's way more than just finding the right molecule. It's about this clever engineering and understanding biology and a lot of trial and error, to be honest.
Wow.
To create a product that really, truly delivers. It's a journey, and the whole journey is really driven by economics.
Right. We've been talking about these huge costs, but what does that mean for people? Why are some medications so expensive? That's something I think a lot of us wonder about.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And I think it's important to consider those massive research and development costs that we talked about.
Right.
Because the pharmaceutical companies need to, recoup those costs somehow. And it's not just about covering the cost of that one drug that made it to market. It's about funding that whole system, including all the failures along the way.
All right. All the ones that didn't make it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in a way, each successful drug has to kind of carry the weight of all the ones that didn't. But of course, it's not that simple either. There's also, market forces and competition to think about. In some cases, a company might be the only one that's making a particular drug. Maybe it's a life-saving drug, and that allows them to set the price a bit higher.
Right, because if you need it, you need it.
Exactly. But it also raises some ethical questions, about access and affordability.
Right.
Especially for, essential medications.
Yeah, the ones that people really need.
And that's where government regulation comes in. In a lot of countries, governments will, play a role in negotiating drug prices or setting some kind of limits to prevent companies from charging outrageous amounts.
Right.
But it's a balancing act, right? Because if you have strict price controls, that can also discourage companies from investing in future research.
Right. They need to make money somehow.
Yeah. So it's about finding that sweet spot, where you're encouraging innovation, but you're also making sure that people can afford the medications they need.
Right, right.
And then you can't forget about the insurance companies either.
Oh, yeah.
They negotiate prices with the drug manufacturers, and they decide which drugs they're actually going to cover under their plans, and that has a big impact on what patients end up paying out of pocket.
Yeah, that's a whole other layer of complexity. So it sounds like there are all these different factors that go into drug prices.
It's a complex system, but I think, if we understand how it works, that can help us navigate it a little bit better.
Right. Be better informed.
And advocate for more transparency and fairness in drug pricing.
Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like while, economics drives a lot of the decisions in drug development, there's also this tension between the science and then affordability and just the ethics of it all.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. And it's not all doom and gloom either. I mean, there's incredible innovation happening all the time. I'm really fascinated by the evolution of drug delivery methods. We're moving beyond just, traditional pills and injections.
Right.
There's some really cool stuff happening.
What kind of stuff?
Well, take nanoparticles, for example. They're these tiny, tiny particles, and scientists are figuring out ways to use them to deliver drugs directly to specific cells or tissues in the body.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's instead of bombing the whole city, you're sending a targeted missile right to where it needs to go.
So you're avoiding all that like collateral damage.
Yeah, exactly. And that means you can minimize side effects because the drug is only going where it's needed.
Right.
And it can also make the drug more effective because you're getting a higher concentration of it right at the target site.
That's cool.
And I mean, we're even seeing things like microchips and implantable devices that can release drugs over time.
Wow, so it's like a slow release?
Yeah, on a controlled schedule. It's really, really cool.
Like science fiction coming to life.
It is. But, it's not without its challenges, of
Yeah.
course. One of the biggest hurdles is, making sure that these new materials and devices are safe to put inside the body.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a big one.
And then there's the challenge of, actually figuring out how to manufacture these things on a large scale
Right.
while still maintaining that precision and quality control.
Right. You don't want to mess it up.
Exactly. But, it's such an exciting field and it has so much potential to, revolutionize how we treat diseases.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it brings us back to what we were talking about before with formulation, because even with these, super high-tech delivery systems, you still have to make sure the drug itself is formulated correctly.
Right.
It has to be stable, it has to be effective, it has to be compatible with whatever delivery method you're using.
Right.
So formulation is still crucial.
Yeah.
Even as the technology gets more and more advanced.
So it's all connected.
It's all connected, yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of connectedness, one area I'm really excited about is personalized medicine.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that term.
Yeah, and it's basically the idea that you can tailor treatments to each individual patient.
Oh, wow.
Based on, their unique genetic makeup, their lifestyle, their environment, all of that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So imagine a future where your doctor can, analyze your genes.
Okay.
And then prescribe a drug that's designed specifically for you to maximize its effectiveness and minimize the side effects.
That's a good one. So is that actually happening or is that more like a future thing?
We're starting to see it in certain areas.
Okay.
It's still early days, but, in cancer treatment, for example, there are targeted therapies now that only work for patients with specific genetic mutations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's happening. It's still early days, but it holds so much promise for the future of healthcare.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is.
But with all this amazing stuff happening, we've been talking about the challenges and the economics and the cutting edge science, but what about the people involved?
Oh, that's so important.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, drug development is about people.
Yeah.
It's about scientists who are driven by, curiosity and this desire to help others. It's about patients who are facing these, life-altering illnesses.
Right.
And healthcare professionals who are trying to provide the best possible care.
Yeah.
It's easy to get, caught up in all the technical details and the numbers, but it's crucial to remember that there are real people at the heart of every scientific breakthrough and every new medication that reaches the market.
Absolutely. And, for every drug that's successful, there's so many stories of, dedication, perseverance, and honestly, sometimes heartbreak too.
Yeah.
It's a long road.
It is a long and hard road, and there are no guarantees.
So while we're talking about, these billions of dollars being invested, we shouldn't forget about the human capital, right? All those countless hours of research, the failed experiments, all the emotional investment that goes into this.
That's right. And it's often that human element that drives the innovation. It pushes the boundaries of what's possible. Behind every, groundbreaking discovery, there's a team of passionate individuals who are willing to dream big and, work tirelessly to make those dreams a reality.
Yeah, and their work has changed so many lives. But what about the stories of the drugs that don't make it?
Oh,
What happens to those research projects? Is there anything we can learn from them?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think, in drug development, the failures are just as important as the successes.
Really?
Yeah, because each failed experiment, each drug candidate that doesn't, make it through clinical trials, it provides valuable insights
Okay.
that can then inform future research. So it's not about seeing those failures as setbacks. It's about, using them as opportunities to learn and refine our approach.
To get better.
Exactly. And sometimes those failures, they can lead to breakthroughs in other areas. Maybe a drug that's ineffective for one condition might actually show promise for a completely different one.
Oh, wow.
Or a discovery made during one research project could spark a whole new line of inquiry.
It's like that saying, every cloud has a silver lining.
That's it. And, that willingness to embrace failure, to learn from it, and just keep pushing forward, That's at the heart of scientific progress.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge that the path to discovery is rarely straightforward,
Yeah.
and setbacks are just part of the process.
Right. So those failed projects are actually still contributing to the advancement of science, even if they don't result in a new drug that people can take.
They absolutely are. They're adding to our collective knowledge. They're helping us understand biology, disease, and, those drug development processes better.
Okay.
And sometimes they lead to those unexpected discoveries that can have these huge implications.
Right. So it's really important for scientists to communicate with each other.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Open communication and collaboration, that's so important.
Yeah.
It's not just about sharing your successes, it's about sharing your failures, too.
Right.
That way we can all learn from each other's mistakes and, avoid making the same mistakes twice. It can really accelerate progress.
Okay. So while we're celebrating all the amazing new drugs that are changing lives, let's also remember to, acknowledge those research projects that maybe they didn't quite make it, but they paved the way.
Exactly. They deserve recognition for their contribution to science, and they taught us valuable lessons. It's a reminder that drug development is a team effort.
Yeah.
It's a journey that we're all on together, working towards a healthier future for everyone.
So you were saying earlier that, a lot of drug development is driven by economics, but what about the diseases that maybe they don't attract a lot of investment because they mainly affect people in poorer countries?
That's a huge issue.
Yeah.
And it raises some really important ethical questions about access and equity in healthcare. It's just a sad reality that the diseases that mostly affect people in low-income countries, they often don't get as much funding for research and development.
Right. It's like market forces aren't working for those people.
Exactly. And so it's really a humanitarian issue. Thankfully, there are some organizations and initiatives that are trying to address this.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there are, philanthropic foundations, for example, that specifically fund research on neglected tropical diseases. And those are the diseases that disproportionately affect people in developing countries.
So it's about finding alternative ways to fund those projects.
Yeah, and prioritizing research based on human need, not just on, market potential. And there are also some new models for drug development that are being explored
Okay.
that are more sustainable and more equitable. So, for example, there are some organizations that are looking at partnerships between, the public and private sectors, where governments and nonprofits would share the costs and the risks of developing drugs for those neglected diseases.
So those collaborations could be a way to make sure that those life-saving medications actually reach the people who need them, even if they can't afford to pay a lot for them.
That's the hope. And it's really encouraging to see that these initiatives are gaining momentum. It's a reminder that while economics is a factor, our ultimate goal should be to use scientific innovation to improve global health and well-being for everyone.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that's a great note to end on. It's like, access to healthcare is a basic human right.
Absolutely.
And we all have a responsibility to make sure that the benefits of scientific progress reach everyone, no matter where they live or how much money they have.
I couldn't agree more. It's about using the power of innovation to create a healthier and more equitable future for all.
It's really inspiring to see how science and, the business side of things, how they can actually come together to make a difference in the world. But I'm curious, what are some of the biggest success stories that you've seen in drug development?
Oh, there are so many. It's hard to pick just a few. But one that always comes to mind is the development of penicillin.
Oh, yeah, penicillin, that was huge.
I mean, talk about a game changer, right?
Yeah.
It completely revolutionized how we treat bacterial infections. I mean, it saved countless lives.
It's amazing to think about how something, seemingly so simple could have such a big impact.
It is, and it really shows you the power of, just basic research and being open to those unexpected findings. You never know where the next breakthrough is going to come from.
That's true. What about the polio vaccine? I mean, that was a huge one, too.
Oh, absolutely. The polio vaccine is another incredible story. It's a testament to human ingenuity and collaboration, people coming together to solve a really big problem.
Yeah.
I mean, that was devastating disease. So many children were paralyzed by it.
It's amazing to think that now, in many parts of the world, it's practically eradicated.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It is. And it shows you what's possible when science and funding and those public health initiatives all align, They're all working together towards a common goal.
Right.
And, more recently, we've seen incredible progress in treating HIV/AIDS.
Yeah, that's true.
What was once a death sentence is now a manageable chronic condition for many people.
Yeah, that's amazing. It really shows how far we've come. And these advances aren't just about living longer, they're about living better, improving quality of life for people.
That's such an important point. It brings us back to the human side of drug development.
Mm.
Behind every successful drug, there are all these individual stories
Yeah.
of people whose lives have been completely transformed. I mean, people who might have faced a debilitating illness or even death, they now have a chance at a healthy future.
It's those stories that make this whole field so meaningful.
Yeah.
It's not just about, molecules and profits. It's about making a real difference in people's lives. And it's not always about those blockbuster drugs for, the really common diseases.
You're right.
There's also important work being done on those rare diseases, the ones that don't affect as many people.
Orphan drugs, yeah.
Yeah, and there's often less financial incentive to develop those drugs.
That's true.
But there are researchers and companies who are doing it anyway.
Yeah, they're committed to helping those patients in need.
It's inspiring. Even when the market is really small, they're still tackling these challenges. It's like there's an ethical dimension to drug development. Like everyone deserves access to those treatments, no matter how rare their condition might be.
I agree. And that's where, government incentives and nonprofit organizations can really make a difference. They can help support that research in those areas where, maybe the profits aren't as big, but the need is still huge.
Yeah, for sure. So while economics plays a huge role in drug development, it's clear that there's also this human element.
Absolutely.
This drive to help people alleviate suffering. That's what motivates a lot of the people in this field.
You said it perfectly, and I think that's what makes this whole field so fascinating. It's this intersection of science, economics, ethics, human stories. It's a story that's still being written, There are new chapters all the time.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from, the business side of pharmaceuticals to all the cool science that's happening. But if our listeners could only take away one thing from this whole conversation, what would you want it to be?
I would say this. Drug development is a long and complex process. It's not easy, and there are no guarantees.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act. You have to balance scientific innovation with economic realities and then, the ethical responsibility to improve human health. It's not easy, but it's a journey worth taking.
I agree. Because the potential rewards are huge.
They are.
And it's a journey that requires, people working together, perseverance, and a deep understanding of not just the science, but also the human stories behind it all.
Well said.
So the next time you pick up a prescription, think about the incredible journey that drug took to get there.
Yeah.
And all the complex economics that made it possible.
And remember, the story's not over. Drug development is still happening. There are tons of challenges out there, but there's also so much opportunity for innovation and progress. This is a field that has the power to, transform lives and shape the future of healthcare.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been fascinating. And we'll be back next time with another deep dive into a new topic. Until then, stay curious.